Hello and welcome everyone to this Blogging for Jobs webinar, How to Measure Success in Employment Branding with Analytics. I'm excited to have you here today. This is an interactive session. If you have been on presentations past, you know that I like to do poll questions. We're looking for your feedback, so if at any time you have a question throughout the presentation, just shoot it over into the question section and we'll be addressing them. Depending upon how the panels feel in the question, I might just shoot it in the middle of the presentation, or we also might address them at the end. You can also ask questions on Twitter as well if you just use the Blogging for Jobs hashtag. We'll be monitoring that and tweeting throughout the presentation, and so you can connect with attendees and speakers as well during your time there. All right. For those of you who are interested, we are an approved provider for HRCI. So if you have a HRCI certification designation, you will receive 1 business credit for this webinar. I have also submitted this to SHRM. It's for if you have the SHRM certification. That's a new process, and I will let you know what we find out about that here shortly. For the HRCI information, and you will get a copy of that in your email inbox on Monday if you're watching this live. That today is the 26th, Monday is the 30th, so look for that in your inbox on Monday. Included in this email, if you're watching this live here presentation, you'll receive the HRCI code, a copy of the slide deck, and also any accompanying information or resources that we share throughout the webinar. I will also go ahead, and if you want to access the slides right now, you can certainly do that. Just go to the short link b4j.co/EB-analytics. I'll put that here on the screen. Connect to that, and you'll be able to download the slides directly from SlideShare if so you desire. So we'll send you the HRCI code, information with the copy of the slide decks, and then any additional resources we mentioned throughout the presentation. If you're watching this on demand in our learning management system at learning.bloggingforjobs.com/LMS, which you are welcome to access any of our free on-demand webinars there. I think we have over 30 right now, all eligible for HRCI credit, but you can access that, and then at the end of the presentation, scroll down to the bottom of your screen. On the right-hand side is a hyperlink that will give you the HRCI program number. You have to watch the entire presentation that we're recording right now to be eligible for the credit. All right, let me know if you have any questions, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about our sponsor, which today is Glassdoor. And I'm so thankful, and I hope that you are too, that they are supportive of Blogging for Jobs and then providing great resources and information to our readers. According to a 2014 Software Advice report, 48% of job seekers in the U.S. use Glassdoor when searching for a new job. They research company culture, salaries, benefits, interview questions, business outlook, and CEO ratings. The fastest growing area of content on Glassdoor is the job section, where they allow employers to reach job seekers at a pivotal point in their job search process. They also serve up targeted ads to job seekers based on their search behaviors, which makes these ads highly effective compared to job board standards. So that's a little bit of information about our sponsors. Here's another slide with additional stuff, and you can kind of see really across industries and size of companies, they're out there and they're active. We'll be talking a little bit about Glassdoor today. As we talk a little bit, we'll be talking about analytics. We'll be covering some other resources and reportings as well. But thank you to Glassdoor for sponsoring and supporting Blogging for Jobs. Appreciate you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our speakers. Hi again, I'm Jessica Miller-Merrill. I'm the chief blogger and founder of Blogging for Jobs. I consider myself a student of the human resources and recruiting industries. I love to research, test things out, try new things, talk on all topics related to our industry. So I'm excited to talk about this particular topic because I feel like the 2 panelists that we have here today have some unique expertise and experiences that many other recruiters or talent acquisition leaders do not, and they're going to be able to share some tips, secrets, and with specifics to analytics with us today. The first panelist I want to introduce you is Carrie Noon. Carrie, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. I've been on several of your past webinars, so it's very exciting to be on the other side.
So tell us a little bit about you so we know who we're talking to.
Okay. So I started in employer branding in 2007 with Sodexo. Had an unbelievable opportunity to get in on the front end of a lot of what we see today. I then, after about 5 years, 4.5 years, I left Sodexo and went to a IT tech company in DC on the digital marketing side, so increased my knowledge of social media. And now I have been with Amtrak as employer brand program manager for about 2 years and a couple of months, and have had an amazing opportunity to really start a new program and work with an amazing group of HC professionals and recruiters as we develop this program.
Awesome. Welcome. I can't wait to hear some of your nuggets of wisdom. And you've been on this really since pretty much the inception of employment branding. Before it was called employment branding for sure. The next panelist I want to bring in is a great friend of mine and somebody who I highly respect in the industry. She has so much knowledge and is just a great person in general, and that is Carrie Corbin. Welcome to the webinar, and tell us a little bit about you.
Thanks, Jessica. So I've been in recruiting, in some facet of recruiting, HR, employment branding for about 15 years, and spent about 7 years with AT&T, and kind of started about the same time Carrie did with Sodexo in building a talent attraction employment brand strategy at AT&T in 2007. And so was very fortunate to kind of be in an opportunity there to start from the ground up and a very rich legacy company and build that out over several years, and then went from there to Samsung, and actually in the past 6 to 9 months have been working with my business partner, Crystal Miller, and we have our own agency, Branded Strategies, where we have really focused on, really looking at the HR technology market and specifically in the recruitment and the employer brand space, and helping companies kind of on both sides of the fence with kind of employment brand consulting from the TA perspective, and then also working with some different vendors, kind of infiltrating the space. And I'm actually broadcasting today from eHarmony in Santa Monica, who's one of our clients, and they're kind of doing some cool stuff. So I had to adjust to the the time change this morning, and so I'm just glad I actually made it onto the webinar this morning.
We're excited to have you on the webinar. And so here's the funny thing. When I asked these two ladies to be on the webinar, I did not think that their names are not spelled the same, but they are both Carrie. So for the purposes of if we pose a question, Carrie with a K will be Carrie Noon with Amtrak, and then Carrie with a C will be Carrie Corbin. So just to keep you on your toes this Thursday morning or afternoon, depending upon what time zone you are in. All right. So let's go ahead and kind of get started. One of the things when we have been talking about employment branding is there's a lot of noise right now in the space. There's a lot of conversations, blog posts, articles, webinars like this one, many other presentations and topics about it. Oftentimes, they are generated by people who aren't actually practitioners in the industry. It doesn't mean that it's wrong that they're part of the conversation. I'm thankful that they are willing to share and want to generate interest and talk about the topic of employment branding. But I really wanted to focus on talking with Carrie and Carrie today and getting what their definition was. We could kind of set the stage before we go into analytics specifically. So I'm going to start with Carrie with a K and see if you can tell me, what do you consider employment branding? Because there's a lot of things that employment branding is not. So I'll ask Carrie with a K first.
So from my perspective, employment branding is an extension of the corporate brand, and what it does is it promotes the company based on the total rewards and the perks and the reason why, the culture of the company, the reason why someone might want to come work for the company. And then it is also how employees feel about working at the company, because that's the best way to communicate an employer brand is through employee stories and the experiences that they have every single day.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to throw this over to Carrie with a C and see if there's anything she wanted to add.
Well, you know, I think we're all aligned on kind of our perception here, and I guess the easy definition from my perspective is just it is essentially, you know, the perception of what it's like to work for a company, and it encompassing both that internal, you know, employee perception as well as your external job seeker perception. One of the things that I'm a little challenged with is I hear a lot of people talking about, you know, you don't own your brand, your employees do, and or the market does. It's people are setting the stage, and but I do think that there's some, when we talk about employment branding as the action of, you know, how do we guide and influence our perception. And, you know, one of the things that I think we have to be mindful of, especially as that particular conversation is happening, you know, amongst all the noise, is, you know, what if your brand perception is wrong? You know, then that's not truly your employment brand. So I do think we do have ownership, you know, in our respective organizations, you know, on the HR and the recruiting side of the house to, you know, to take some responsibility there and to help guide that. And then so that's where, you know, we have a lot of the confusion around the activities that encompass, you know, employment branding. You know, and to the point of what it is not, it's, you know, I think we definitely get a little siloed, and I'm kind of focused, you know, especially those of us that have kind of grown up more in the TA space, to look at recruitment marketing and sometimes, you know, refer to our recruitment marketing activities as solely, you know, that's our employment brand, and you know, that's a portion of it. You know, when we look at social media, and I think social media is a big reason why employment branding has become so much more, you know, in the spotlight, because employers have had to pay attention to it. And you know, so social media is, again, it's not that in and of itself is not your employment brand, but it's a part of what you have to manage as part of the, you know, the activity with your employment branding. So I think it's important to make that distinction as we have this conversation, and understanding we still have that internal audience, and you know, there are things that we need to do internally within our company culture to help kind of guide and influence there too.
And you know, Jessica, this is Carrie with a K again. I loved what Carrie with a C just said, because it's true. It's the perception often kind of leads the employer branding, and Amtrak is a great example of what a misconception of a company. Many people think that we are a government organization, and in fact we're not. We are partially funded, and that also is a misconception. So that responsibility does come back to the marketing and the activity of employer branding. So I love that, Carrie. I'm going to add that to my bits of knowledge.
One of the other things I just wanted to briefly touch on, and we actually have a previous webinar that Carrie with a C was a part of, and Shannon Smeedstadt with CEB, where we kind of just went through the basics of employment branding. But I wanted to get some terminology out there for you to just put on your radar screen. I have some links to kind of what the definitions are surrounding this: employer value proposition, the employer brand, and then the brand in general. I wanted to send it over to Carrie with a C and see if there's anything she wanted to touch on this slide additionally.
So I love that we're talking about this, because again, employer value proposition, I think again we talk very loosely around it, and I think a lot of us really realize this is something we need to care about, but we don't really know what it is. And so when we talk about employer value proposition, this really is understanding what is important to your employees, you know, working for your company, and what is it's basically what I call the DNA of your company, and identifying who are we as a company. And I think a lot of times we start down this path of we've got to have an employment brand, and we've got to build an EVP, and we end up kind of taking on more than we can chew. You know, it's the equivalent of trying to eat the elephant all at one time, I guess. You know, and we try to do a gap analysis and figure out where we want to be and all these goals, and really at its core, just knowing who you are and what is your company identity and what is it that makes you unique and that, you know, makes employees want to work for you, that you can then turn around and go full circle with to use that in your messaging and kind of defining your pillars for, you know, attracting talent to your organization. I don't know, is that what you were looking for, Jess?
Sounds good to me. I mean, I just want to have a conversation around it because I feel like there's so many questions around this, and I've been to several conferences that were just LinkedIn Talent Connect was one that I went to last year, and I felt like there was, and maybe I was in the wrong sessions, but there wasn't a conversation that just defined these and queued them up before we started going to here's how I measure effectiveness and here's how I build a strategy. So
Right.
I kind of wanted us to kind of go back to basics a little bit in case some of our folks were like, what is this thing? That's why I'm here. So, Carrie, with Kay, was there anything you wanted to add to the conversation on this slide? Anything important sticks out at you?
No, other than I think that when we started the process of building our EVP and employer branding, the strategy, it was surprising to me how much information we had currently from multiple departments, and so just the beginning of the process, the discovery process, was enlightening for us, and then more and more the need to collaborate with. It doesn't just come from marketing or come from human capital or human resources, depending on where you are. It really is a company-wide effort.
Good. All right, let's move on because I want to make sure we talk about analytics here. So just some more kind of general information about employment branding. I think we've kind of covered this, that it's complex, obviously. It's why we're taking some time to kind of set the foundation here. It needs to be focused and it needs to be measured, hence why we're talking about analytics. So when we talked about kind of what we were measuring, one of the things I asked both Carries was, what do you measure when we're looking at employment brand? And these are kind of the three areas that we came up with: awareness, reputation, and then also competitive analysis. Is there an area maybe that we left out, Carrie with the C, that you wanted to throw in or give some more information about?
Well, I mean, I think we're definitely going to talk a little bit later in the presentation specifically, but these, I don't think so. I mean, we need to know, are people aware of us as an employer, right? So it's one thing to have an employer brand, but if nobody knows who you are, then and we want to understand too, like the nice thing about employer branding, and it's not as scary as I think sometimes we make it out to be. There, and to Carrie's point about it being part of a broader corporate brand, what we do from an employment branding perspective can very much be aligned with what we do from a consumer brand, and helping really understand who are we targeting, who needs to be aware of our message, how do we get in front of them, and from a job seeker perspective, understanding that our job seekers are still consumers, right? And so they still tend to approach their job search very much the way they do, a major purchase, and they're going to research us as an employer, so even if they haven't heard of you, they're going to go to Glassdoor, they're going to do a Google search, they're going to try to find out what they can about your company before they meet with you. And let's be real, we've trained them to do that. We've told job seekers for years to come to your interview prepared, know about your company. What we weren't prepared for necessarily was everything that was going to happen with social media and the internet, and how so much information was going to be freely available. So you want to make sure that awareness aligns with, as they're building an awareness, that they see hopefully a positive reputation, and that and as they're looking, they probably are going to want to know who your competitors are. They're going to look from try to understand what your industry is. So those are all things that we need to, when we think, okay, what is our employment brand? How do we define it? How do we measure it? Those are all things that we need to make sure that are kind of part of our toolkit.
Yeah, and I would just add, this is Carrie with K, that content and measuring content can help shape the strategy. It might be something that you think that the content is something that the employees and the candidates are looking for, and then really just validating what you're saying, and with not only the employees, but then also the engagement level that you're getting through the different channels that you have.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of confusion around just that engagement and influence, because we've looked at what are the basic things that we can measure with social media, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but Those are important things to measure, but they do kind of funnel up into that higher level of awareness and reputation, right? So it's bigger than just how many likes and clicks are we in, shares of content are we getting, but all of that content and that messaging really is helping us build this, that, and ultimately that when we look at what is the final piece of what we're trying to measure, all of those kind of funnel up into that awareness and reputation.
So while you guys have been talking, we've been multitasking, and I asked a poll question because if you've been on these webinars, you know that I love interaction. I think that that's really important. I want to hear from you guys, and as listeners and attendees, this is a conversation for everyone. But we asked if you're using analytics to measure your employment branding efforts, and so 71% of folks on the webinar are not. So this is a great starting point, and this gives us an idea of what we want to focus on and kind of where we go from here. So, all right. So I put together a little slide with just some general information about maybe how to build a business case. But more than anything, I wanted to hear from Carrie with a K about how she went about doing that at either Amtrak or a previous company, because I feel like the starting point sometimes is really hard.
Well, it's interesting because I was hired into Sodexo to create the employer branding and then hired into Amtrak to create employer branding. So in both situations, the company itself had already recognized the need for a unique position. But I will say, in the interim, when I was at CSC and I was on the digital marketing side, there was a difference of opinion, I would say. It's just the knowledge of employment branding was not as evident as it was at Sodexo and at Amtrak. And so one of the ways that we started to do that at CSC from a digital marketing perspective is to help all of the employees find their voices and become influencers and become brand ambassadors. And we did that through training. It didn't take long. The marketing team, the digital marketing team over there, it was just amazing. Had a very creative mind, and I think ultimately it comes down to the support and the trust of executive leadership. And there are lots of statistics that you can use to reinforce the need for it. But I think just proving that it is a collaborative effort and that it's not an ownership of the brand. It's more how can we work together to make sure that we're bringing great people like the current employees into the organization.
So I'll add kind of what we did at AT&T is something that I don't know that that there are that many companies that, I guess, I don't know, I think I tend to take for granted sometimes how progressive we were with some things. So you could still take on the strategy that we did, but social media was so new, and a lot of what we did originally, I will tell you, we did a lot of the tactics before strategy because we were trying to figure it out as we go. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that now. I do think that there's enough information out there now that can help you kind of build that business case. But we took more of the forgiveness rather than permission approach, and partly because at the time we weren't doing a whole lot to partner with marketing. And a lot of the things that we took on, we kind of built our business case in the process, and then we took it to marketing. So we actually did some of the stuff with social and mobile, and some of the things we were doing around branding efforts before our internal corporate comms groups did, and we were able to kind of get some quick wins, and build some successes and kind of building out the strategy. And but once we did kind of develop that partnership, some of the best things that we did, kind of to Carrie's point, were the employee advocacy efforts. And there's lots of people that talk about employee ambassadors and advocates and brand ambassadors, and again, that gets to be one of those murky areas. But there's some definite information that kind of proves out that if you can use your actual employee voices to help build that brand awareness, and they become your trusted advisors, and you can empower your employees to even become thought leaders, in a sense, depending on what your industry is. But there was Edelman did a survey in 2013. They called it Trust Barometer Index, and it's like 41% of people think a company's employees rank higher in public trust than a firm's PR department, their CEO, or their founder. That's pretty impactful when you realize that this is the weight that employees' voices have, and if they are helping carry out your brand message, whether it's your consumer brand, your general corporate brand, or your employment brand, there's definitely a benefit to you. And so one of the very early on things that we did was, our corporate marketing group actually built what we called a Twitter tribe at AT&T, where we were kind of just paying attention to what employees were saying and doing on social media, and we kind of made it like an invitation-only process to invite them in to get some specific content about the company, and then just to have they were kind of like company insiders, if you will, and hey, come be part of this tribe, and then we'll provide you information, so it helps you build content, helps you build thought leadership, but you take it and make it your own because it's still part of your messaging. And that was one of the very early on fundamental things that we did, and it worked really, really well in building credibility, not only for us as a company, but on all sides, from our employment branding, our consumer branding, and then just from a general employee base. And so there is really something to that whole buzzword of authenticity and transparency when you allow your employees to be a voice for your company.
I think the point that we want to make before we go to the next poll question is that it's not just about the candidates. So you're hearing Carrie talk about their programs with employees who are currently working, and being a champion of the brand and working with them, and not just focusing on the candidate. And I think that some of the things we're going to talk about today are candidate focused, but there are some other tools that and measurements that we can use that can be more focused on our employment branding efforts with our current employees. So let's go to the next question, poll question, real fast. So just curious at what we're using maybe for our measurements. I know some of us aren't using things to track. However, I do think that there are many of us that are probably maybe using things like URL tracking, maybe some HR tech reporting, these cookies, and then candidate self-reporting, which I can't believe we're still talking about candidate self-reporting in 2015. I wanted to have Carrie with a K maybe kind of walk us through some definitions of these things, because, what's the difference between a URL tracker versus a cookie? These might be some areas that people are unsure about.
Well, I'm going to let Carrie with a C talk about cookies, because I'm not very familiar with the cookies, but the URL tracking, we actually use SuccessFactors and formerly Jobs2Web for our recruitment marketing, and we have a URL builder where we actually can build out a specific URL if we're doing running a campaign, or if we are promoting an event or a job, or something that the company is celebrating. So then we can track where we're influencing the candidates coming into the organization. And then we can also, the URL tracking, and we can also see where we're influencing current employees as well. That's not inside the recruitment marketing system that we use, but there are other ways of building a vanity URL to help track that content management.
Yeah, so I guess probably the easiest way to kind of make the distinction between the two is when I look at URL tracking and vanity URLs, the way that I'm going to use them is, so say I might be at a particular diversity career event, and I want to track how many people hit that link. So if I'm going to do marketing materials, I'm going to give them, hey, instead of going to my company career site and search for a job, I'm going to send them to my company career site / Nashimba or, whatever, whatever it is that I need to do. If I'm doing something at South by Southwest or CES or at the SHRM conference or whatever, some kind of industry event, I'm just going to, tag that, and then I can see, because I'm going to be using Google Analytics and tracking too, I can see how many people are going to be hitting that particular URL from an event, and that's going to help me do some basic, ROI for, wherever my efforts are for whatever campaign it is that I'm executing. I might do the same thing if, heaven forbid, I'm still using print advertising somewhere, which I have still done recently, and I know there are still sometimes we need to do that. I can drive them to a particular landing page that has a particular URL, and I will know that only people that saw this ad or this billboard or whatever, hit this link from this advertisement. So I can still see some, how well my media is working for me without having to go through a ton of expense to do that. With cookies, this is where you're actually putting ad tags in your URLs that are a little more hidden, and that way I can track my source. A lot of your ATS systems will now do basic source tracking. So if somebody comes directly from Monster or CareerBuilder or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, based on that link that you've created for that job, they'll be able to track that source straight into the ATS. But it's a linear tracking. The good thing about cookies is that if somebody hits my job link, maybe from a Facebook link, and then they go to MSN, and then they go to whatever different sites that they're on, and then they eventually make their way back to my site and they apply, I can still track them. And that's where you can get a lot more accurate data on where your candidates find your jobs and how they're making it into your system.
I think the cookies piece that Carrie just said is really important, that even if they're surfing other sites, that cookie is captured, that data is captured. So we don't have to worry about if they visited 20 other websites. We still, before they go back to the site, we still know that that's where they came from.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add to that is when let's talk about candidate self-reporting for a minute. I mean, we sometimes that if that's all we've got, and that's all we've got, but candidates notoriously, they're going to give us sometimes the information that they think we want to hear, or they might know a friend there, but they're not really an employer referral, but that's how they're going to record themselves. But if we give them a drop down of 200 different sources, guess what? They're not going to go through that, and I think we all know that, but we work with what we've got, right? But when you can really electronically track your campaigns, the value there is what makes it important. It's when at AT&T we were hiring 25 to 40,000 people a year, and so we obviously were hitting we've got a lot of applicant volume, and we really need to find out where those applicants are coming from, and we used multiple sources. But when I'm using Monster, CareerBuilder, LinkedIn, Dice, I've got different SEO efforts, I've got all these different things that I'm doing to track. Monster could be driving, hundreds of thousands of applicants to me, but I'm only maybe hiring a fraction of those. I need to be able to track those hires all the way into the system. And because of that, I can have a cost per application and a cost per hire for each source. So while my cost per application with a job board might be a couple of dollars, my cost per hire may be significantly higher if I've got a low volume of hires that are actually made from that. So you're being able to track just your applicants isn't necessarily always accurate. And then you can also see, hey, this particular media might be driving me some good hires, but it's so expensive still, so you can start to really flesh that out. And then that data empowers you when you're doing your negotiations for your contracts with media and with vendors. That's what empowers you to be able to go to the vendor and go, these are the types of positions that you're driving successful applications and hires for, and this is where your value is to me, and it takes the power out of them telling you what they're doing for you and gives it to you to be able to do that. And that was probably one of the core things that made my team so much more successful, because we were able to really take our dollars and use them smartly and make those adjustments, and then look and reallocate that money to maybe build out other things around our SEO and our brand presence, and put some more money towards content development, things that we really were harder to build a business case for if you didn't have some hard data around how well your sources were performing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, just to be able to track the influencer where they first came from, and then dive in a little deeper and find out where they actually applied. And there's a whole whole gamut of where they may have also they may have come to a career fair, and really being able to track that first click down to the hire, and then looking at the cost for people who actually start an application and then people who actually finish an application, and then quality of interviews. I mean, it's the amount of information that's available in some of the HR technology is it just really makes our job so much easier these days. And to Carrie's point, Carrie with the C point, it really helps to drive budget allocations, especially if you're on a tight budget, or you know, you have a lot of projects that you want to do and not enough budget to do it.
The report that you see in front of you is actually from Glassdoor, and this is just showing job click activity. So it's not necessarily showing the source of hire, and I think that's an important distinction to make. You know, just because, like Carrie's saying, well, both Carries, that there's lots of activity driving people to your website. Activity is fabulous. Traffic is great. However, what's the conversion rate of those hires? Is Glassdoor giving you better results than a Monster? And so making sure that we're measuring these things. And I like the cookies because we're able to measure that independent of the technology. I love my technology. However, I'm always a little skeptical, and you know, I'm speaking in a little bit old school here, but you know, I remember certain job boards sending me Excel spreadsheets of the amount of activity, and I'm just telling myself there's absolutely no way that all these candidates came from this source. And I think that the more data that you have, like that's reported from you or taken from you, the more clean it is.
Yeah, well, and I'll add one more point on the budget allocation to kind of give you guys a real life example. I won't necessarily say what the job board was, but there's not that many. So they came, you know, I know what I was paying for them at AT&T, and so keeping in mind I was hiring, you know, and let's just say an average of 30,000 people a year. And when I made the transition from AT&T to Samsung, that same company approached me. I was at the Samsung Mobile location, and we actually only hired about 1,000 people a year. And that same company came back to me and brought me a proposal for half the amount of what I was paying at AT&T. And you know, that was one of those I'm sorry, what moments, you know, because I mean, for 1,000 hires, you're going to try. I mean, so just being able to, because I knew how well our campaigns were performing and how we were using media, and you know, to have that same vendor kind of come to me and do a completely different song and dance and try to sell me so much stuff for so little. You know, it was an easy, educated conversation for me to have with them, and kind of send them back to the drawing board and have them come back and be realistic, because I was armed with the knowledge of, you know, what would make me successful in that. And you know, and I do feel like any vendor is going to take advantage sometimes if we're not measuring appropriately, to say, oh, here's what you need, and you know, especially with job boards are trying to differentiate themselves, and so then they're going to pile on social media and talent networks and all this other, you know, and try to just get you. And so having a little bit of education around, you know, the measurement of your media sources and your tools, and knowing what's working is going to be, it's immensely helpful, especially, you know, in that transitioning from one company to the other.
Sidebar, Sarah McAlpine is nerding out about you talk about source and electronic tracking.
Sweet. We can nerd out together.
Yeah, I know. That's like the best topic if you ever want to get Carrie going. That's the one you need to do. That's why I knew that she would be great to talk on this topic. So we went to the poll again, and so I just want to share the results real quick, because we're kind of move over to the social media side of things quickly, and then we'll get to some different kind of reports and pieces. But 62% of you are measuring hires by source, which I think is fabulous. You're looking at fans and follower count and some social reach stuff, and then retweets, likes, and then hearts, which is Instagram. I wanted to throw this over to Carrie with a K and see, what are your thoughts? Do you guys measure retweets and likes and fans and followers? I mean, is that the most important thing for you guys? How do you factor that in when you're trying to explain to people like how social impacts the overall employment branding strategy and process?
So for us, the social media helps from a candidate experience. So the inevitable black hole of applying for a job, and they just perhaps have not heard back as soon as they would like to hear back from automated sources or from direct contact with a recruiter. So it gives the candidate another way to get in touch with our team. So that's one aspect of it. It also gives us the opportunity to direct certain talent pools to landing pages or microsites. And then from an employee perspective, we have started to use the hashtag Team Amtrak. And when we first started Instagram less than a year ago, it's been about 6 months or 7 months now, that really has been a great resource for us. So it's not just showing potential candidates what it's like to work and the culture and the employees that work at Amtrak, but it's also recognizing and celebrating our employees using the hashtag. So we're seeing passengers everyone who sets foot on the train is a potential candidate, obviously. It helps them to get a better understanding and see the smiling faces and enjoy the experience. And then employees are starting to tag photos when if they take a picture with a passenger, or if they have a great experience, like if they're, we have a organization in New York, a group in New York, and they have regular lunches and celebrations, and they take pictures, and then they share that using the hashtag. So it really is bringing together not only the candidates with our recruiters and the right recruiters, because that's really ultimately, it's not just to get a basic generic message back, but actually to get some sort of contact with the recruiter who can help them. But then it also brings together the entire community, the entire employees. And so yes, we do. We look at people who are liking our page. We just started a Facebook page about 4 months ago. We also try and work as closely as possible with our corporate brand spaces. They have a much larger reach than we do. I think our Amtrak Facebook team has 500,000 on Facebook, and equally impressive numbers on other social spaces. So when we can team up together and share that message, that obviously helps to support and show that we're working as a team also. And the content that we're sharing, for example, we showed a picture of a conductor kind of hanging with his hand outside the train, just kind of doing a safety check. And just that image alone, and the tagline that we added with it about riding the rails, it resonated not only with employees. Employees would say, "Oh, I know that guy. I worked with him 15 years ago," or "I work with him now. We have a great crew." But then the potential candidates they just loved it. They loved seeing in action the photos. So we do look at what kind of content the people who are visiting us on these spaces, what kind of content they want from us. And it's different, obviously, from LinkedIn to Facebook to Instagram to Twitter. So we change up the message and, kind of just work within each of the different platforms.
What about you, Carrie, with a C?
So I guess kind of going back to that question of how do you measure social media and what are you measuring? I think the biggest piece for me with the likes and the retweets and the shares and that kind of stuff is understanding there is a level of engagement and understanding what resonates with your audience. So we didn't necessarily measure our retweets, likes, and shares. That I mean, we did, but it wasn't the first thing that we looked at. We really just wanted to see kind of a measure of overall engagement, because that engagement gives you almost, I mean, you're actually measuring, but it's still almost more of an anecdotal perspective to understand what resonates with your audience. And the impact there is that you can then tweak your content from there. And so it kind of plays into your overall content strategy. And for me, one of the things that we did when we looked at, okay, what are the social channels that we're going to be distributing content, but also let's look at the newsletter we send out with our talent network. Let's look at our website. Let's look at our videos. Let's look at the just different media pieces that we share. Where can we use employee stories and that and help share their story and help carry that message forward? So even though it's indirect, it wasn't our employees, kind of to Carrie's point, we're still sharing, we're still sharing what's important to them as far as working for the company and understanding that their voice carries so much weight. The cool thing about how you even get employees to participate in that, one, if you do have employees that love working for you, they're really quick to raise their hand. I always joked that I would say, hey, I'll make you famous, come come be in a video or come let me do a photo shoot. And the irony is that I'm in some of the videos and some of the photos, but I'm the one that wanted to be behind the scenes, and we didn't necessarily get enough people raising their hand to participate that I got pulled in front of the camera, which I hate, but I still want to be able to carry the torch forward for my brand. And but that engagement really is your sticky. So when you're talking about content management, HR people by nature are not marketers, right? So content strategy, what's a content strategy? And oh my gosh, we've got to be on social, and then we've got to build out all this stuff. And so what can you do to kind of create some efficiencies across all of those channels, and where can you duplicate resources so that you aren't recreating the wheel? And what can you borrow from your corporate social sustainability teams or your marketing teams that where we're kind of sending forth the same message? And all of that stuff is valuable in terms of seeing what resonates and helping build that strategy. One other thing that I'll add to is Universum is actually creating a new product that I don't know that it's actually out yet, but people are starting to talk about it, where they are going to measure your engagement and actually give you information around specific to social media, where they're going to give you information on, hey, on Mondays, this is the type of content that resonates specifically with employment and recruiting related audiences. So we know we've got a lot of that data that's out there just about social media in general, but they're targeting it specific to our market. And so they can tell us, the best days that we're getting engagement on what types of content and, volumes and, some really, and understanding reach. And I think there's going to be a lot more value in how we measure, so that it's not just your standard looking at your likes, clicks, and retweets. I know that was a really long answer, but I wanted to kind of segue into that.
No, I think that this is good conversation. We are about 10 minutes away from being done, so I want to make sure that we take a look at some reports, actually. This is a report that Carrie with a K from Amtrak provided, and this isn't necessarily their information, but just gives you an idea with a product, Rival IQ, is that what you told me it was, Carrie?
It is. It's a product that I discovered a couple of months ago, and I have been looking for something like this that helps to report. Like, I can go into the dashboard and literally answer a question on the fly for our Chief Human Capital Officer if he asks me about our social media activity. Obviously, this is social media activity and what's happening on social, and I think that it's really easy to use social media and just kind of go with the flow and enjoy it, and maybe not take a look or say that it's really hard to measure the analytics. But when you have the ability to go in daily and see, okay, your engagement or average tweets per day are down, and therefore your engagement, and you can put the equation together and understand why your engagement is down, and you understand that it is active participation that helps to drive the engagement level. Or if you go in and you see, because of that employee photo that you posted on Wednesday, your engagement on Facebook is up 110%. Those are some of the wins that you can celebrate, and then you can also adjust as you move along if something's not looking exactly right. And I report out on the fly often, and then I also report out weekly and monthly. Weekly, just kind of a quick summary; monthly, in a much more in-depth that gets shared throughout the company. And then you have a screenshot of social recruitment monitor, and this one also is a great, so you can take a look at social recruiting spaces. And I think on one of the most recent EV chats on Twitter, someone talked about social recruitment monitor and mentioned that someone was on top. And I think the most important thing to say about this is it only takes one really good piece of content to kind of move yourself up and down on this scale. And that's what I love about it, is because it is a constant equation, kind of completing the equation on what kind of content is going to be useful for the candidate and for the employee, the internal and external candidate.
Yeah, I'll add on this that when this first rolled out, we were ecstatic that AT&T was one of the top brands on there, and has stayed consistently either on the global or the U.S. But surprisingly, they tend to stay higher on the global side, even though they have much more of a domestic presence. But it can change from week to week, so it does give you a real-time indicator of how well you're doing, and what types of content, when you're talking about that engagement and reach, and who is it influencing. You can kind of see where, from a benchmark perspective, this gives you your competitive analysis of just how do we compare to our peers and what we're doing with social and how we're managing our brand.
I think it's important to note that this is free, so at no cost you can access it. And anybody
yeah,
can
that too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good tool that if you kind of, and it's fun to kind of, really, it's kind of like clout in a way for recruiting or employment branding teams. So you can kind of watch the ebbs and flows, and as Carrie's saying, that with a K, the content, a really good piece of content might move you up the list very high very quickly, and you can kind of watch how that happens.
And Instagram, I like that they have Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. I think LinkedIn also, although I'm not sure that LinkedIn lists are fully built out yet.
I don't know if LinkedIn lists will ever be fully built out. I mean, they're kind of shutting down the API or in the process a little bit. I mean, LinkedIn, their talent product has good reporting too, but I don't blame them. They don't want to share. I want to talk a little bit about measuring influence. We talked a little bit about this, and that it's not just employees, candidates, that we're looking at employees. And I just wanted to mention a little bit about Adobe Life. We talked about Team Amtrak, which I think is amazing and wonderful. And so these are the kind of things that we need to be thinking about. And there is a great tool. It's a paid tool, but you can use it to measure impressions and reach for hashtags, which some of that can be gamed. Like anything in social media, it doesn't always an accurate representation of how effective a campaign is. But that's a tool that I use called Hash Tracking, H-A-S-H tracking.com, and it will allow you to pull some reports. You can see whose activity, is most talking on the hashtag and who has the most reach, all these different things. Adobe Life is another hashtag, and you can see here that they're taking it a step further beyond just the hashtag, and they're featuring different people at Adobe, and this particular person is Kim, and she's a communications manager at Adobe. She's the third person to swim 7 oceans, and she's raised $1.2 million for the Semper Fi Fund. Adobe has an interesting training program. All employees go through a social media training program, and they are working very hard to tie social media activity to direct sales of their product. So they're looking at the influence, and there are employees at the organization who have sold, and they can account them for over $2 million in product. So an individual doing that, influence isn't necessarily always about your follower count. It's your engagement level, and for Adobe, they're looking directly at revenue. All right, I want to go to talk a little bit about some more of the reporting, because I feel like we're almost up at the end of time here. And so these are the 4 focuses, but we're just going to go right into some stuff. And I realized after we posted this, this is the URL tracker, not the cookie tracker. So Carrie with a K, I do want to talk a little bit to this quickly so people can kind of see how the URL tracker works.
Yep, so this is through formerly Jobs2Web, now SuccessFactors Recruitment Marketing, but you can put in a specific job, and this, I think I mentioned this a little earlier, and then assign a campaign name to it, and then the same campaign based on wherever you are posting. So I just took this as an example of a position that we have in Oakland, California. And then so this particular unique campaign URL is for the social network and LinkedIn job postings. And so that's where I would normally start, and posting it as a job posting that we actually pay for on LinkedIn. But then you can also change up the source, and if perhaps a recruiter is attending an event, we can change that source to event and then name the event. Or if our campus recruiter is going to a particular college, we can identify which college she's attending, and then you can get a short URL. You can't customize it to a vanity URL, but you can. There was a conversation just the other day on Facebook about QR codes, of whether or not they're outdated, and I think I commented that the people that I work with love them. They'd have 4 on a flyer if they could. I think because they see that particular audience that they're speaking to is using them, and so they, it's just, I think, a personal preference. But this we can track through to a hire if it does result in a hire. But we can also see if they initially came to us here, but then maybe they came back and finally applied directly through our career site, or they applied through a Glassdoor profile or something of that sort. So we have the first level and then a second level of tracking down to a hire. And the only thing I'll add about the URLs is that you have to be careful not to let them get out of hand, because if you have 100 recruiters and you're going to have a specific URL for each of the recruiters, let's just say on their LinkedIn profile or in their email signature, you have to be very organized, because if you just going through and looking at your campaigns, if you have 150 different campaigns, you need to make sure that you understand where they're all coming from.
Let's move over to Google Analytics. I know that Carrie with a C has used this pretty extensively. I'm a fan of Google Analytics. I am on every day monitoring web activity and trying to understand where people are coming from as far as sources and the amount of time that they're spending on the various blog properties that I own.
Yeah, so it's free, guys. If you're not using it, get with somebody within your IT team, or if you've got an agency that you work with, and see if it's just putting some code in your website to be able to track, and you can see where people are coming from without having to do cookies or any of the other stuff. You can see where people are coming from that are hitting your career site. You can see what countries they're coming from. The cool thing too is that you can see what kind of devices they're on. So we haven't even talked about mobile really, but you can see if they're coming from a desktop, a tablet, a smartphone, and really kind of understand where your traffic is. So if you're not mobile responsive or mobile optimized on your career site yet, that's where you start building some of your business case too for that. So you can attend webinars all day long and hear all the stats we spout, but this is where the rubber hits the road, and you'll see what's happening from a traffic perspective. So it's absolutely incredible data. It's a little overwhelming when you first look at it, but just click around, play in it. You're not going to break anything, and just learn it. And you'll know how much traffic you're getting. I can't say enough about how awesome it is, and just use it. Find somebody to help you if you're not. I'll help you. Call me.
Work with your IT team to get the code in. I mean, it's a free service, and it's addictive. Like, I just want one big computer screen or TV screen in my office so that I can watch the real-time analytics of people visiting from different countries. That's how my daughter learns geography. She's 6, and she's like, "Oh, Mom, where's that person coming from?" But it is. I love the mobile aspect. Carrie's right. It even tells you tablet, so mobile device, tablet, or desktop, so you can make the differentiation between those, which I think is amazing. This is another just example of the Glassdoor report, just some of the information that you are able to get. They have a free account. There's also a paid accounts where you can get even more data and access to their analytics and information, which is it's definitely helpful to understand your hiring process, where maybe some gaps exist or some potential problems or challenges might lie for your organization. But I like the demographics piece of it, so I can see years of experience, female versus male. I mean, if you are an affirmative action employer, this information could be really helpful, also specifically by position, if you're looking for that data. Let's see. One thing I wanted to make time for before we go to maybe a couple questions is Carrie with a K has this amazing report that she sends out, and she alluded to it a little bit, to her chief HR officer every week or every month. Can you talk a little bit about everything that's in that report, and then maybe other sources or some things that are in the report, and then maybe some other sources that you pulled data from to make this comprehensive report?
Sure. So I use the insights that are available on the different platforms. I certainly, you can't ignore those as great options for reporting. But then Rival IQ that I mentioned really touches on all of the different social spaces, including SEO and the marketing part of it, and then LinkedIn. So I can look at top content. I can look at the reach that, so basically what I do is I build out a landscape of talent competitors, obviously in the rail industry, people that we are seeking as employees, and other competitors are also seeking out. And I can see, and it's not just a kind of a lurking and see what someone is doing and trying to do it better, but it's also, I think, building for the candidate the ability to show a supportive industry in itself. So I think that's one thing that the rail industry has that maybe some other industries don't. It really is kind of like a family. So I use it to not only look at the mentions, so the influencers in these different spaces and influencers for the different talent competitors, but I also look at it as a way of connecting with other companies and other people like me who are working for companies to try and attract the talent. So since we were a little behind, probably about 4 or 5 years behind most of the companies that are in our landscape, our numbers are smaller, but what we look at, so I show that information to the Chief Human Capital Officer and my boss, who is the head of OELD. But then I also look at I keep going back to the content, but I go back to the content and show the value of having great content and disseminating it out to the candidate, because it's not just a big fire hose of information. It really is targeted to the different communities that we're looking at. And then I also use the advanced analytics out of the JobsWeb SuccessFactors RMK tool, and that also talks about visits, members, people who are signing up for their email job alerts, where they're coming from, how important mobile is, if there's a drop-off in mobile because we don't have a mobile apply yet. You know, and that helps to drive the budget for moving in the mobile apply direction. So that actually made the business case to be able to do something and to start working with a third party on that.
And the URL tracker that you're using, where are you getting that from?
That's from Jobs2Web also. And I keep calling it Jobs2Web. It is not called Jobs2Web anymore. It is SuccessFactors RMK, but that's within the tool as well. So all of that information is in one big dashboard. We also have Workforce Analytics as part of that dashboard, which is another module to SuccessFactors. And so we're able to look at turnover rate, and we're able to look at time to fill, all of the different stats that would reinforce an employer brand strategy and a recruitment strategy.
Let's go to questions, because we have a couple, and I want to make sure if you guys can hang on, we'll do that here. We'll ask a couple. Okay, so this question is, let's go with Kara with a C. Are you using tagging on the social front to determine which content types are performing over others?
No.
No?
Now, but that doesn't mean you couldn't do that. It just and it's been a year and a half to 2 years since I did this at AT&T, and Samsung just wasn't quite there during the time that I was there. So, but I do think that that is something that you could do, especially if you don't have a very robust content strategy. Just even if you do it. I don't know. I think it's a good question. I think it could be done, and I would be interested in kind of hearing the results. If anybody does do that.
So we actually do that for our career-related blog, and the number one by like 50% is candidate resources. So we have particular topics, and so what we're trying to do there again is narrow down that fire hose of information about what it's like to work at Amtrak, and candidate resources is our number one. So career tips, that kind of information.
Yeah, I will say that that is one of the things that the Universum product will help with, and it's called Blueberry, but again, it's kind of in beta right now and hasn't rolled out, but that is something that I think will be a little bit simpler. The problem with cookies is that they are complicated and they take a lot of work, and so you want to make sure that but so I think more tools are going to come out there like the Blueberry product that are going to make it easier to measure some of that stuff, but they're going down that path too. So. There you go.
I want to thank you. I know we have a couple more questions, but really we're over time. So we will. I will get back to you guys, those of you that ask questions, or just shoot me an email, and I'll talk with both Carries and see if we can get you the information, the resources that you need. I do want to thank Glassdoor again for sponsoring. You're awesome. We appreciate you. Check them out for a lot of different reasons. They also have lots of really great content, and they have a conference coming up later this year on employment branding. So maybe I think I will be there. So thank them. Also, here is how you would connect with either of the Carries. Carrie with the K or Carrie with the C. And then we have some of our information that we mentioned today listed here. I do know that, I know we mentioned Universum. I don't have that data here listed as a source, but we can send it out to you via email, or you could just go to universum.com and be able to get some of their awesome information. Once again, if you are interested in Human Resources Certification Institute credits, those are going to come to you. Today's Thursday if you're watching this live. Monday will be in your inbox from me. Copy of the slides, recording, so you can watch this again or share with your friends or team members, and then also your HRCI code. If you are watching this on demand in the Learning Management System, at the end of the recording here, just scroll down, bottom right-hand side, and you'll be able to access the HRCI code information. Working on the SHRM certification, so I don't yet have it. You can submit this one as a one-off if you are SHRM certified, and I can walk you through with how to accomplish that as well. Blog post coming through soon on that topic. Once again, thank you to Carrie and Carrie. I appreciate them for taking the time. Thank you for joining in today. It was a lot of information in really a short period of time. Maybe we do a follow-up webinar on this coming soon. So have a great day, and we'll see you guys next time.